Hello, I'm Reto, and welcome to this short but hopefully comprehensive understanding of why stress is such an influencing factor when considering COVID-19, coronavirus, and our lockdown in general. I want to take us through a few areas of how stress impacts us and perhaps what we can do about it too, so not to feel completely overwhelmed. But the first thing we know is that there is a huge amount of stress during a pandemic. For sure, our response to it, the way we live through it, what we see people experiencing around us, all have a massive magnitude of order of stress that kind of follows us, plus the isolation that one would feel during these periods too. So what we know is that stress during a pandemic will absolutely cause certain effects. And the increase in stress will cause an exaggeration of those effects. So if we were quite resilient and quite robust and able to manage a lot of these things, there will be, because of the manifold increase, this is where we see the cracks starting to appear. So the fear and worrying, for example, about one's own health and the health of people we love, those close to us, the ones we care about, our significant others, parents, siblings, children. Our financial situation, under lockdown, can we make money? Under lockdown, what if I fall ill? What if my business is eradicated during lockdown? And of course, also, which isn't spoken about a lot, is the support services that I might rely on. If I have a special kind of support requirement, a disability that needs a supportive environment, maybe a support group I used to go to. It could be even something as simple as I used to decompress going to play golf with my friends. It's a loss of those support services too, not just the ones that we can measure very clearly, like health support and medical support. So this is very important about the fear and worrying, and I'm going to touch on why these factors are so impressive to us. There can be changes with the stress in sleep and eating patterns. We may sleep more or less, might be more disturbed, and we might find ourselves eating more or less. We also will find ourselves having difficulty in actually getting to sleep and difficulty in concentrating for periods of time. Worsening of chronic health problems. So if I entered into a pandemic or into a lockdown with a certain chronic distress or disorder, there may be a worsening of that symptomatology. And of course, health conditions in general for mental health, we see a degradation because of the influence of this incredible amount of stress. And of course, the coping strategies that go with these surely indicate that we're going to be doing more coping and perhaps not in ways that are beneficial to us long term, but in ways that we think will help short term. And so these are things like tobacco, alcohol, and other substances and other processes too, not just those in particular. And there's a reason why all of this happens, and this is maybe the part that is more useful than knowing that we are stressed out during something like COVID-19 or lockdown or any pandemic in general, but is to know what the drivers are that are implicated in these processes. So for emotional stress, that is the ability to contain and manage an intrapsychic stress, intrapsychic meaning inside the mind. There are certain drivers on both sides, those that will increase stress and those that will, of course, decrease the stress. And we see for emotional distress or stress, the increases are anxiety, unresolved or uncertain predictability, and what could be more unpredictable or more uncertain than waiting for every president's announcement, not knowing what the next set of rules are going to be, or if the very chessboard that we've been playing the strange game of chess on is not even the board we're playing on anymore. Maybe there's a new set of things happening, and this will immediately drive up emotional stress. Anxiety, by definition, is probable uncertainty. The longer we stay in that zone, the more we feel the stress from that anxiety, and this is why the anxiety will drive that up. Self-inhibition, being unable to use our mouth words to express how we're feeling or express a need, will absolutely drive up our intrapsychic levels of emotional stress. Systemic forces, if we're in an environment, either socioeconomic, a family system, a cultural system, where there is any kind of forces. They could be oppressive, they could just be neutering, they could be any kind of forces. But if we are in systemic forces, that have some kind of impact on us, on our behavior, on our expression, those will drive up emotional stress. Ascribed roles. What if I feel like I need to be the caretaker of the family, and gosh, now COVID hits. So we see that your stress level will go up because you feel this ascribed role, which is not your own, by the way. It's not an achieved role. It's a role that you would have maybe taken on in childhood, maybe taken on in adolescence, maybe through developmental processes. You take on this role, the caretaker, the pleaser, the whatever it might be, the plan maker, the one who makes everyone laugh, the one who takes everyone's pain away, the one who sorts everything out. These ascribed roles, which we wear as very, very heavy kind of a heavy wardrobe, to be sure, and not necessarily one that fits us very well. This ascribed roles will very much increase our amounts of stress. Enmeshment. If I don't know where I end, and someone else begins, and I take on emotional responsibility for others, or I perhaps don't know how to express myself when I'm feeling a certain way, down, happy, unhappy, sad, stressed, to other people because I'm worried about the way they're going to react, this is referred to as enmeshment. Which will certainly drive up emotional stress. And repression of emotions, keeping them bottled up, we know from all the work in neurology, in psychology, that the more we hold in an emotion, the more difficult it becomes, because it almost, as a magnitude of order, becomes greater and greater. So if I can't just say that I'm feeling a certain way and I repress them and I say I'm fine, this can drive it up tremendously. But the good news is, of course, that we also do have drivers which drive down stress, which is if I can act with a sense of agency, if I can do, act and think in the world that creates output for myself, if I have autonomy, if I'm allowed to do things on my own and don't have to be, checked every single second of the day by someone else, or all of my agency is eroded by the fact that it's someone else's desires and wills and not mine. If I can do these things on my own and they're of my own accord, surely my emotional stress then goes down. If I've built up resilience over time, if I've been through circumstances where I can foster a way of being more resilient, that will drive down the stress. Of course, an increased predictability of the world around me, knowing what happens on a certain date and a certain time, this will drive down emotional stress. If I can express the way I'm feeling, often when you talk to someone and you get something off your chest, that's expression. Just doing that, we see a 50% reduction in stress in individuals. Individuation, when I stop behaving like I need to in a system and I start behaving like I truly feel, this reduces my intrapsychic stress. And finally, catharsis, which is basically the expression of emotion through physical manifestation. And for many people that's different things, but the easiest way to describe it is through tears, for example, if I'm feeling grief. And these are the drivers of emotional stress both up and down. But this goes on, of course. We have also physical stress we need to talk about when it comes to COVID and lockdown. And we cannot just think about the emotional processing that we have. We need to so too think about the physical effects. Because often what happens is we think we can do certain things on an emotional level, but if we're still feeling factors of physiological stress, our emotional stress increases. And so too, it works the other way around. We might feel like we're getting our physiological stress relieved, but we're not. We're still self-inhibiting. We're not expressing ourselves. We still feel enmeshed. We're still fulfilling ascribed roles. All of these things are super important as well. So these are some of the areas where we see the drivers driving stress up, and then so too can relieve stress. So drivers that move stress up physically is if you have a mismatched circadian system. If you're going to bed at 4 a.m, sleeping 2 hours and waking up, you're not moving in your circadian system. Now, this is different for different individuals. There are genome types, the early morning larks, and the night owls and the early morning larks. But if you are counter that, like shift work or working through the night to get things done, this will slowly start increasing physiological stress on the body. Immobility, stiffness, and weakness and exhaustion. So I'm not saying here fit or being a triathlete or an amazing runner. I'm saying here that if our body does not feel like it can help us in certain tasks, this can drive up our physical stress and exhaustion. If I can't manage my pre-existing conditions, if I have something that I'm busy treating or something I have to remedy throughout my life, for example, diabetes 2 or any kind of back pain, if I'm not managing those, this will certainly drive up my stress. Extraneous depressants and stimulants, if I'm taking in caffeine has a half-life of 12 hours. I might think I can go to sleep fine after drinking coffee at 12, but there will be an inhibiting factor. The body will have to work harder to get to sleep. if I'm taking in stimulants to wake up because maybe I'm out of my circadian rhythm and maybe I'm trying to kind of catch up with the day, this will all start adding an extra layer, a huge extra layer of stress on the system. Irregular and rapid brain adaptation, or what I mean by that is if I'm taking certain neuroleptics or if I'm taking certain elements in and I'm causing my brain to kind of have to adapt, so whether I'm drinking a lot or whether it's tranquilizers, I'm causing the brain to have to constantly adapt to the things I'm putting in, and that puts huge amounts of stress on the system. And this works with the last point here, which is high gearing of sympathetic and parasympathetic systems. The sympathetic obviously gear kicks in to make us more alert and operate, and the parasympathetic to calm us down. And if we are gearing constantly, trying to move between those states rapidly, that puts a huge amounts of excess physical stress, which will then result in emotional stress on the body. But so too, we again have factors which drive this down. So for example, if we feel mobile and flexible and we have body strength and stamina, this will help us achieve tasks and not drive up the stress levels. If we have a regulated circadian cycle, so if we're sleeping when we should be and awake when we should be, this will help tremendously. Good sleep hygiene, so good circadian rhythm, fantastic, but also are we sleeping without certain aids of medications, because we need to get NREM, excuse my spelling there, NREM and REM sleep. A wonderful book if you want to read it is Why We Sleep by Robert Whittaker, if I'm not mistaken. Work rest cycle, is this balanced? And we see that during COVID and under lockdown, there are many of these areas that we start seeing as, okay, I understand. I'm not exercising the way I used to. I'm eating differently. I'm trying to adapt myself into sleep, but will get out of being sleepy. Work cycles are different. All of these factors absolutely will combine to increase our levels of stress. And stress is such a really wily kind of fox. We don't see the stress levels take an effect on us until we see a physicality or we feel a mental kind of strain, a heavy strain. And that really is quite far up a kind of a graph where you're about to meet the apex of the amount of stress you can bear as an individual. And one doesn't want to push the human body or mind into a position of how much stress can you bear. You want to try and ameliorate those factors earlier on. There's something I want to touch on briefly here as well before I give you some tips to how to ameliorate stress during COVID-19 and certainly lockdown or a pandemic in general. And in fact, these would be true for any kind of managing of stress. But one needs to say that we have a lot of people that have recovered and they would have gotten sick. And that layer of stress and that kind of understanding of where they sit with their families and their loved ones would add a huge amount of strain, So, for example, there might be some emotional reactions if you have had COVID-19 or the symptoms of it or have been diagnosed with it. You may have mixed emotions of having gotten better and survived this calamitous time. There might be lots of emotions, and these are all normal for this process. Mixed emotions, including relief. Fear and worrying about your own health and the health of your loved ones. Of course, we'd worry about that. That's a normal response. Stress from the experience of having it and being monitored. There's been a lot of people that have had this disease have been under a microscope, and that is incredibly stressful. A lot of people are quite private, and also being treated like a number and a process can be very, very dehumanizing. And a lot of issues and mixed emotions coming up from the fact that people around us may have had it, and even once I've had it, am I still infectious? And these are normal responses. These are normal psychological responses. You may have, if you're super high functioning and have a idealistic perfectionism, then you may be very stressed out by the fact that you weren't on your A game while you were down. And this for me is heartbreaking, because when someone is ill, no matter how good you are at your job, when you're good at it, you should be allowed to be sick when you need to be, and recover when you need to recover, and take as much time as you need to recover as you should. And of course, worried about getting reinfected or sick again. And there might be lots of other disturbances in your emotional and physiological and in your psychology, in your landscapes. So these are all very, very normal. And I want to just end off now with some of the ways we can ameliorate some of these stresses and feelings, and try and create, remember, in the emotional stresses, there are lots of areas there where you see having certainty becomes so important to try and lower the amount of emotional stress we have. So routine. Change the pace of the routine. Now it's working from home. Now it's X. Now it used to be Y. Keep the routine, but slow down the pace. Times are different. The pace needs to be different. Take control to increase a sense of safety. Again, bring the locus internal. So instead of worrying about the whole world's response, my government's response, the pharmacy down the road's response to COVID, think about what I'm doing, and then in doing so there's a sense of autonomy and agency, because I'm finally pulling back the problem or the issue to a probabilistic uncertainty that I can have some kind of operational control over in the here and now. I can maybe wash my clothes when I get home, I can wash my hands off and obviously wear the mask, but move the control locus back to yourself instead of this feed from the world we get every single day about how out of control things are or semi-control they are. We can't change that, and to think we can gives us a huge sense of distress. So take control to increase your sense of safety. Use self-compassion. Be gentle with yourself and others during this period. It is abnormal, or this uncanny new phrase, the new normal, but it is different to what we've known, so therefore a different gentle response is required. Sleep and relaxation, so breathing exercises, highly recommend those. And monitor your sleep. In psychology, it's really interesting. A lot of times we consider touchy-feely and soft skills, but actually a lot of it is pretty darn science-based. So write down the sleep you get. When you wake up the next morning, go, sleep was crap, sleep was good, 5 out of 10, 10 out of 10. And just keep writing it down, monitor, and then look at that over a week and go, okay, so my week's graph of sleep has kind of moved around a bit. What can I do to make small iterative changes? Start training yourself to do breathing exercises. When you wake up, put your back up against the wall. If the wall's near you, put your back up against the wall and do deep breathing. 4-3-4, 4 breaths in, 3 breaths hold, 4 breaths out. Start training yourself to reassert control over areas that you have control over, like breathing. And deep breathing obviously goes a long way to ameliorate physiological stress. If you eat healthily, you're giving your brain the best chance at dealing with this and having the most amount of resilience. I know it's not easy, but it's something to consider. Again, psychology is not touchy-feely. Monitor what you do. Go, and be gentle. Go, well, I ate this and that and those nights, and then I kind of ate this, and okay, so what could I do tomorrow? And then, but be gentle with it. But keep your eye on the fact that if you're feeding your brain, feed it with things that it can help keep resilience up. Exercise and movement, and we saw in the physical stress area, flexibility or inflexibility rather is a huge kind of stressor. So just do small things. As you sit at your desk, every now and again, pull your shoulders back, move your neck, let your body know that it has control and that it can stay flexible within reason always. And here's a very important part, is you may feel the need to isolate more because lockdown in essence is isolation. You may feel like you need to train yourself into isolation. I would counter and say reach out more, put it in your diary, schedule calls with your family, be metronomic about it, create a cadence. Just put it in every Thursday, call mom, every Friday, call X, every month, put it in there, more certainty, more connection, be gentle with yourself. If you don't hit the milestones of connection, it's okay. But remember that isolation will be a natural reaction and that we should push ourselves to maybe, even if you're checking in for a minute, go, hey, I'm okay, I'm fine, ciao. Retain that level of connection. And then remain hopeful. The pandemic, keep a sense of optimism. Things change, they always do. Things have a habit of coming and going. This is true for science, true for physics, and true for psychology, and true for viruses. These things will end the same way they will again one day begin. So have a sense of hope around that. Remember, it is not like this forever. And that may go a long way to really help you. And reach out for counseling, therapy, online groups. Find a counselor, find a telecounselor, a therapist, Lifeline, companies. If you get a small nagging sense that you're not maintaining a level of ability to cope within your stress levels, just ask for help. Someone else can take the burden for you and say, right, I think there's some areas we can look at. Remember that when you have autonomy and agency, your emotional stress lowers immediately. And at that point, you ask for help. Someone else steps in. They can help ameliorate physical stress. And this really puts everyone in a really good position going forward. The last bit I want to share with you today is around the huge vectors of information we have. balance the stream of information you get in, because the more of a stream of information you get in about COVID, the more helpless you may feel. This obviously increases emotional stress because you sense a lowering of agency and autonomy. The whole world is, screwed, so it's difficult to control. Try step away from a lot of different outlets of information if you can for a while, and just keep your time on those outlets to a minimum, and try keep your eye on outlets that are science-based and that have a good reputation in terms of prognosis, as first of all assumption prognosis, and then dealing with things, like good websites. The World Health Organization, the CDC, is quite good. If you're in South Africa, Western Cape government, the central government's websites are actually very, very good. Make time to visit credible websites, but once or twice a day, and the rest of the day is for you to reclaim a sense of agency, to lower your amount of stress during this very, very difficult time.